Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, we're welcoming Maura, an interior designer who created the Everwoods brand in Ohio's stunning Hocking Hills region. Drawing inspiration from childhood summers at a Wyoming dude ranch, she and her husband Tony have built 4 distinctive cabins that showcase the evolution from rustic log cabin to modern mountain retreat in this hidden Midwest gem. What started as a dream to escape corporate America has become a lesson in brand building, strategic partnerships, and navigating the complexities of hosting both intimate couples and large groups. From hand-sketching blueprints at their kitchen table to managing 2 HVAC failures in a single winter, she shares the realities of running multiple properties while maintaining a full-time design business. We'll explore her approach to creating functional layouts that cater to different guest dynamics, the challenge of protecting families from themselves in our hyper-connected world, and how she's adapted to market changes with innovative add-on services ranging from in-cabin massages to photography sessions. Whether you're considering your first cabin investment or looking to scale an existing operation, this conversation offers honest insights into the emotional labor of hospitality, the unexpected rewards of building community with guests, and why sometimes the most foolproof solution means removing the remote control entirely. Let's do it. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm really excited to chat with you. Where am I talking to you from now? Are you in Columbus?
I am. Yeah, it's about an hour and a half away from our cabins down in the Hocking Hills.
Yes. Okay. The Hocking Hills. Can we start by talking about that? This feels like a very unknown world to me. Other than every cabin that shows up on my Instagram feed from Hocking Hills is like the newest, fanciest, highest end, like something is happening there. We talked to Levi Kelly about it way back at the beginning of the podcast, but that was like 2 years ago. Can you tell people about Hocking Hills?
Absolutely. It's the most beautiful spot, I feel, in the Midwest. It is truly a hidden gem, though. There's still so many people that don't know about it. We'll have people on Airbnb reach out to us and say, I had no idea that this existed, but we want to come visit now, right?
Yeah.
So there have been rentals in the Hocking Hills for many, many years. I used to do this with my family growing up, going down to the Hocking Hills. We would stay at these really cool log cabins, and there's still so many of those, but things have really changed over the past 5 years or so down there. I mean, there are people like the Cliffs. I don't know if you've talked to them
That
yet.
was the first one that I discovered on Instagram. That was just like, where is this place? What is
Isn't
happening?
it so cool? And Christine
so cool.
and Kimball are so awesome. They're very nice and they're very welcoming to all of us people that kind of came after them. So
Yeah.
But it's like it feels like you're in Bali when you see, their spot. And then there have been others that have followed and not necessarily, done the same design as them, but it really has become a hub for like the modern cabins and all things unique. And I know Levi lives very close to there and we're so lucky to have him. He's just like 45 minutes away. So he will gladly come to, our places when they're finished up as we go. But yeah, isn't it? It's just a cool hidden gem in Ohio of all places.
Well, now I wonder, when you describe that it's been around forever and there's these like older log cabins, what do you think led to the turning point where it went from what I'm picturing? Because Boone, North Carolina, I feel like is similar, where there's now like newer cabins, but it's been a destination for a long time. And so now there's not tension, but there's like this struggle for all these old cabins to kind of keep up in a growing, saturated market of really fresh, new, modern cabins. When did that turning point happen for Hocking Hills?
It's hard for me to say because we've only been around. We'll be hosting for 4 years coming up in August. So I still feel like we're one of the newbies, right? Like, a lot of people look to us for like mentorships and things like that. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. We're just winging it, Yeah.
Well, 4 years isn't insignificant. I do feel like you learn a lot in that first year. And
you
then
do.
4 years.
Absolutely. You just get thrown into it, right? But there has been a shift. And I honestly think it's just, there's a younger generation of people that want something a little bit different and more within Ohio. And while I think the log cabins are so cool, I mean, I still am so attracted to that vibe. I just think that there's this new wave of design coming. And from me having an interior design background, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different with ours as well. I kind of am getting like these mountain modern vibes with a lot of the new places that are sort of popping up. And that's definitely like, we didn't feel like ours was something so unique that nobody's ever done it before. But that was sort of the direction we wanted to take our places. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening in that area. And there are such beautiful, like the hiking and the waterfalls, and you kind of feel like you're out west when you're in the state park down there. So it doesn't truly feel like an Ohio experience. You're almost getting that mountain experience when you come at some of these newer cabins.
I don't have a lot of experience with Ohio in general, so I don't know what like I would expect from Ohio. All I know is that when I started seeing all these cabins that were in Hocking Hills, I was like, this is not what I would have expected from Ohio. I don't even know what I expected, but I was like, this surprised
honestly,
me.
If you were like more than 30 minutes outside of the Hocking Hills region, you still wouldn't get the vibe that this exists, because it's a little pocket within Ohio where there's these just beautiful cliff sides and things like that you don't find in many other places within Ohio. I mean, Ohio is pretty flat. There's some rolling hills, but this is a really special location.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did your dream of owning multiple properties, specifically in the Hocking Hills, start? Because your history with cabin culture is from out west.
Absolutely, it is. As I said, I went here growing up with my family, and my husband and I have enjoyed taking our son to the Hocking Hills, and it's great. You can even just go for a day visit, which of course we want people to spend the night. Yeah. But it's so close to Columbus that it's just such an awesome little, you feel like you're totally leaving Ohio and just getting that peace away from being home and in the city. We're not city people, even though we live in the city. And it just brings the sense of calm. And maybe I feel a little bit differently now as a cabin owner that, you know, we're dealing with all of these different things all the time, but that's kind of what we wanted to give our guests. So you had mentioned it, but yes, growing up, I was going out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming every summer with my mom, and that was my happy place. And I developed such a love for cabins and the peace felt. We would stay at a dude ranch, and the cabins were kind of primitive. So this is a little bit different than that, certainly. But I want to give people that really like made my childhood. And I just think for these family cabins that we have, to give these experiences to families, to these kids, and they come back year after year, that's something really special. And I feel like, you know, while there's plenty of short-term rentals and Airbnbs out there, the idea of coming with your family and coming year after year and making these kinds of memories is just something really special.
Yeah. Do you think it's harder now for kids to have the kind of experience that you had at the Dude Ranch and Jackson Hole because of how much the world has changed?
The world has changed so much. And that Dude Ranch is now a bed and breakfast, and they don't offer the Dude Ranch experience because they had to shift in a way to kind of keep up with the times, because they don't think people don't necessarily appreciate, you know, going horseback riding in the morning right after breakfast and then going to the dining hall and eating for lunch and things like that. The world has shifted so much. And I think that with our cabins, we certainly tailored them to the way the world looks now, with offering, you know, like add-on services and amenities and things like that. Like you can't go horseback riding on our property, but you can do X, Y, and Z. And we can actually tell you where to go. That's just 5 miles away to maybe do horseback riding for an hour. But yeah, I think the world has changed quite a bit. We've had some guests who have said, can you leave out the Wi-Fi information so that while we're there, I don't want my family to know that there's Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And I love that idea.
I know.
I think it's kind of cool. I'm like, this is great. Next time we go down, like with our family, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. Cause that's that's the best part about being at the cabin. We only have one TV in our cabins instead of in every bedroom, because that's not the point. Right. And I understand wanting to watch a movie, you know, before you go to bed with the family, and, you know, if the weather's kind of cruddy, but that's really not the experience. Right.
Right. And so then it begs the question of how we as hosts who are trying to like create those experiences, how we protect people from themselves. And that might not even be the best way to say it, but even myself, I go to the cabin and what I really want is to disconnect.
Yes.
and to turn off the noise of the world. But I end up on my phone just like everybody else does, right? Or
We
like
do too. And we're guilty of it on every vacation we go on. And,
right.
part of that is being a host. Like you are
Yes,
on 24/7 and you can't really just set your phone aside and say, I'm not going to look at this for
that's
the
right.
next week. But I'm totally with you on that. And I think that there's a balance. I do know that when we're away and on vacation, and even like this weekend, my husband and I have a weekend without our son. He's going to his grandparents' house. And we said, let's not talk about the cabins this weekend. Let's have a weekend where, we just get back to being us, because it's so a part of us now. But I think families experience that. We're not alone, right?
Right.
I think everybody's sort of experiencing that, and the internet and social media and all of these things are just being thrown at us 24/7. And if this can be an escape for people, then we're so happy about that, because that's how we feel when we're there.
Yeah, which is kind of the clash, I think, that we struggle with being owners, between what we fell in love with when we were kids, what we're trying to create for our guests, and then the reality that we face as people working to create that for other people. We can't put our phones down. We can't disconnect. When we go to our cabins, we have long lists of chores and lots of content to capture. When we go on social media, we're responding to lots of questions every day about how much did it cost to build and what is that paint color, or, like all of that. This idea of it being passive income is crazy to me. I mean, I know a lot of folks talk about this, and if you have a property manager, maybe it's different, but like the ways in which it does end up taking over your life in a beautiful and challenging way. How do you all manage that tension?
I would say that we're not totally, we don't have it dialed in. We're not great at it. And I would be lying to you if I said it's not overwhelming, because there are weeks where we will say, what are we doing wrong? I mean, we try so hard, and then X, Y, and Z still will go wrong from time to time. Right. Yeah. And even our son, he's noticed, we haven't given him a cell phone yet. We have technology. We're trying to remain, he's just going to 6th grade next year, but he's like, well, you guys are on your phones all the time. Why can't I have one? And that's like, that's such a reality check, right? It's a little bit heartbreaking. Yeah. He also thinks it's super cool that we are doing something that no one else is, that, right. He knows. And he thinks it's really cool that, I run my own design business, and that, we're doing these cabins that he thinks is really cool to go visit. And he knows that there's some things that come along with that, where, we do we're on 24 hours a day. Right. So he gets it. But it is that like gut punch when he's like, you guys are on your phones all the time. Why can't I have one? And because that isn't what I wanted to show, the next generation, because I know it's already being thrown at them so much. Yeah. So it's so different from when we grew up, and it's hard to know how to balance it. So I don't want to tell you that we have the answers, but we certainly have like the family movie times where our phones stay down unless something arises with a guest, which, isn't all the time, but it happens.
It happens. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I ask because we are so far from having it figured out that I'm always curious what other people do, right? Because we could dream about having a weekend. Let's not talk about the cabins until you get a message about any of the cabins. Exactly. And it might be an easy one where one person can answer, but more likely it might be like, hey, what do you think about this? What should we do about this? And then you're talking about the cabins. It's like impossible to avoid. Right.
I know it is. You're totally right. And I will say it's usually me. I do the guest communication. I don't know how you guys are. Yeah. I assume that you probably did. Yeah. But I always tell Tony, like, if you did the guest communication, we would be getting like bad reviews all the time, because his messages, like his texting, and it just comes off as so abrasive.
Same with my husband.
I'm like, put an exclamation mark.
Have you met an emoji?
Like, I know. People are going to think that you're so mad at them.
And he's like, I answered her question. And I'm like, but not with a smile on your face. And he goes, how do you know? And I was like, because there was no smiling face emoji.
And he goes, my husband will be like, well, it was 10:30 p.m. and I was annoyed that they messaged, because they could have messaged us earlier in the day. And I'm like, well, they didn't know until now that they didn't know how to work it, Right.
So, you're like, that's the work right there. Yes. That moment is, and to me, I think about this all the time. That is hospitality work. When you are annoyed, it is 10:30, and they are also feeling frustrated because they can't figure out something. Right. And so
it's usually the sauna. Like for us, it's always the sauna. They can't figure it out, even
No.
though the instructions are very clear. It's foreign to people.
Yeah.
I
Because
think people
nobody
are
has
like,
saunas at home. Very few
it's a
people.
novelty, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like, this is so cool. It's at this place. I don't ever get to use one. But then they get in it and they're like, what? And it's very
Yeah.
like low technology, I would say. It's just you like turn it one time, you hear a clunk, and then it's on. But I
Yeah.
think people get overwhelmed because it's like a big piece of, equipment.
Yeah. And some of it
Um,
comes from a great place of like, this doesn't belong to me. I want to take good care of it. So I don't want to do anything wrong,
Absolutely,
which is really nice.
for sure. But then you have Tony, my husband, who's like sending the diagram, and he's like, "You simply press this." And I'm like, "Wow, that was so rude. I wish you would
Yeah.
have just explained it to me," because sometimes he can explain things a little bit better, like the technical aspects of the hot tub and the sauna
Yeah.
and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
And
Same.
I'm like, dang, I really wish that I would have taken that question on.
I know. I know. I'm always like, Sean, I wish you would take on more guest communication because I get really anxious about having to be attached to my phone all the time. And I'm like, if I knew that you could take some on, then if I were on a work call, I wouldn't feel anxious about not being able to answer a message. But then he'll answer a message and I'll be like, never mind. I'll
Forget
do
it. I literally will do it 100% of the time.
Yeah. I'll be like, sometimes if it's a technical thing, I'll tell him, can you text me the answer to this, the technical answer? And then I'll
Done the
copy
same
and paste
thing.
that and add exclamation points and
Yeah.
like add emojis and be like, if you need anything else, please just let me know.
Yeah.
And Sean's like, no,
We're
please
happy to
don't
serve
let me know.
you. Yeah, I know. Tony's like, just enjoy your time there and don't bother us anymore. I'm like, this is not the business. It's not
Right.
just that they're going, like, this is the hospitality aspect and the communication aspect that he really doesn't want any part of it. And I try to leave him out of it.
Well, and it is interesting, right? Because I think about this all the time because I stay at Airbnbs a lot when we travel for fun or when I travel for work. And
Mm-hmm.
my expectations of what I want from them in different settings is so drastically different. Right. And
Absolutely.
so then what I expect of the host is different. And so I have to constantly think about we're not just an average Airbnb. What are we trying to create? And what are the small things or daily choices like not being annoyed in a message
Absolutely.
that make it feel like they have a concierge, which you would get in a high-end property versus an annoyed homeowner, which you would get in like a low-end Airbnb, which is fine for some cases, right?
Right.
But
You're
not the one that
creating an
we're
experience. It's not just that they're coming to stay at this place that you own. You're part
right.
of their experience without overstepping and annoying them. But without you and your
Right.
answers, you are part of the experience
Yes.
for them.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is interesting because what I do know about your adventure, and I'd love to hear more about this, is that you knew from the very beginning, we're not just creating an Airbnb. Oh, and maybe then we'll add another Airbnb and add another one. You had this idea of creating a brand from the very beginning. Can you talk to me about like how you knew that that was the way that you wanted to do it and how you approached that?
Yeah, and I don't want to take credit for the fact that we decided to do that right off the get-go. We had mentors that told us that you should do this, and especially in an area like the Hocking Hills where we
Yeah.
saw some of the people who had done the Dunlap Hollows, the Cliffs,
Yep.
Idle Reserve, these really cool, curations and
Yep.
awesome people that really knew what they were doing. And I don't want to say we're riding their coattails. Our properties don't look really anything like theirs, but I knew that in order to be successful within our market, that was something that we needed to do. And I was happy to do it because I think it's really cool to have a brand that people, they call us by name. Rocco, our son, said at school a few months back, he said, Mom, Owen's mom said she stayed at the Everwoods last weekend. And I think it's so cool that a kid retained that his mom, stayed
Right.
at another kid's
Right.
mom's, place. And I
Yes.
think without the brand, maybe that never would have happened. And I know that's just kind of on a small scale, but we do have all these repeat guests that refer to us as the Everwoods, not the Airbnb that I stayed at. And I know that you've talked to some other, because I've listened to all of your podcasts, and I know that you have talked to people about who did direct booking from day one, which we also have a direct booking website that we started on day one. And that quite honestly was just at the guidance of people who had been doing it much longer than us. And while we haven't really had any horror stories with Airbnb, we do know of other people who have had some situations where someone threw a party in their place and Airbnb ended up suspending their listing, even though it had nothing to do with them, while they investigated. And my husband is so type A. He just he was like, we can't allow that to,
Yeah. It's a
factor
risk.
in our business. Like, we have to have a backup plan because this is so much of our livelihood.
Yeah.
We can't allow, we just can't afford really for that to be the end all be all for us.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, when you were thinking about the brand from the beginning, first of all, I love that you had mentors. I feel like when I first started, there was not an open community of Airbnb hosts. And now there's so many people mentoring, consulting, there's masterminds,
I
there's so many
know.
resources for folks wanting to start,
It's
which
really
is
cool.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but you were entering at that time a somewhat saturated market, or at least starting to become, and I can only imagine it's become more saturated.
It really
So
has.
how did you
Yeah.
think about your brand and like distinguishing yourself from the others, being an interior designer? Like, what were some of the things that you did intentionally for anyone who's thinking about buying a cabin in a place where there is a lot of competition?
Well, the very first thing I wanted to do was a wall of windows in every cabin. I love the natural light, but I think that we just sort of chose to first of all, we hand sketched out the blueprints for our cabins.
Yeah.
Tony and I just late nights created the layouts of our cabins because we just couldn't find anything on the internet that was like really what we wanted.
Yeah.
So designing a really functional layout was so important to us. And our two bigger cabins, they live totally differently, but they function for different types of groups and families really well. Where the lodge is great for like big, happy families, and like the A-frame is good for like bachelorette parties or groups that might want a little bit more privacy because it's broken up into 3 different levels, which is, that's pretty cool.
It makes a difference. I do think that's worth noting. You can look, because I was looking at yours and I saw like, 8-person occupancy, 9-person occupancy.
Right.
But the layout can really change the way it's experienced.
It absolutely can. And we kind of call them our yin and our yang because they're on the same 10-acre property, but they attract 2 totally different types of travelers. And then what's really cool is if there's a group that's a little bit larger, they'll rent both of them at the same time. And then usually they gather in the lodge just because it is a little bit more open living. But it's pretty neat to see like the way that people sort of utilize the 2 cabins. So I think functional layout was like our number one. And obviously aesthetics was super important to me just in being a designer and also recognizing that the Hocking Hills has a lot of competition and a lot of people who have done really cool stuff. I wouldn't say we have unique cabins. I just think we have a really great aesthetic and a very functional layout that's paired together, and it creates like a really cozy and comfortable experience for people.
Yeah. How did you think about marketing? Did you build both of them at once?
We did. Well, the lodge was done prior to the A-frame, but the build process was going on at the same time. Yes.
Okay.
Which was a lot, especially when you live an hour and a half away.
Yeah. It's a lot financially too, to think about taking on 2 big builds at once, but then also managing all of the details of 2 builds, furnishing 2 builds. You were doing all of the design work and you were running your business at the same time.
Yes. And Tony has a full 9 to 5, like full-time medical device job as well. So evenings and weekends, we were driving down there after work, getting home at like, 10, 11 p.m. sometimes.
So this is why Rocco knows it so well, because I'm sure he was like with you guys.
Yeah. He'd be like in the car riding along. He's like, at this point, like 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
Thinks it's cool probably at that point.
Yeah.
But then at some point, we're all kind of like sick of this, quite honestly. Yeah. The build process went on a lot longer than it was supposed to. It was like just post COVID, and like things were just kind of getting picked back up, and it was just a really crazy experience. And I don't know how to describe it other than it was a crazy experience. It was almost one of those periods in our lives where you almost like black out. Like you're in the trenches day in and day out. You're not sleeping well. You're stressed constantly, but the end product was beautiful. And I mean, it's paid off. The cabins are not paid off, but like it has paid off for all the hard work that we put into them. And
what was the thing that kept you? I think about these moments, the blackout moment that is how you're describing it. And I've gone through those too. Building our cabin was one of them, when you have so many things going on. And I don't remember how I did it, but looking back at it now and deciding if I want to do it again, I'm just like, I don't think I have the energy.
Yeah.
So I feel like to combat that, you have to have really strong motivation. And so
You
I'm
do.
wondering like what kept you guys motivated, especially during the second half of the build? Because the first half, it's like you expected that. This is exciting. The second
Right.
half, when it's going on longer than you expected, that's when you have to dig deep. What was it for you?
Well, it's always been the goal of having our cabins and my design business is to someday leave corporate America behind in full and be able to focus in on our family more, be able to travel more often and just be our own bosses. And I don't want to say that Tony doesn't, he's so appreciative of this job. He's been with his company for 10 years and he has an awesome manager. And it's, it's allowed us to do so many of these other things that we're doing. But the ultimate goal is to be our own bosses and be able to spend more time with each other. And we work really well together. And I think that not all husbands and wives probably do, but it bleeds into every other aspect of your life. When you're out to dinner, you're not going to not talk about the cabins, right? I'm sure that you guys do the same thing. And like I said, like this weekend, we decided we're going to have like a no cabin talk weekend, which is going to be hard for us because we literally are finishing our 4th cabin here in 2 weeks. So there's just like so much going on, but you do kind of have to like separate, married life and then like being business partners. Right. But this has always been like what has kept us going too, is that we're in this together. We have this very close knit family and our goal is to ultimately spend more time together, and these cabins are going to get us there. And I don't want to say it's all financially driven. Like it's been fun and it's been a challenge, but seeing the way that people are enjoying our cabins has been this really awesome piece that I guess I didn't realize how many people would share their amazing experiences with us. And you kind of get to know some of these groups that come. And like you make all these friends and that's really cool too. And we didn't know that during the build process. Like we just thought it'd be very transactional, and it's not. You do
This is
get
what
to know
Mitch
the
was saying on
people.
our last episode too. I love hearing this, that the reasons we build them are often not even the thing that ends up being the most satisfying, at least in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. Like every time the 5-star review comes through, you like get this warm, fuzzy feeling. It's just like when you get a reservation that comes through. Like I'll screenshot like our reviews to Tony because he doesn't even look at like our Airbnb listing or anything. So I just have to send them to him. And I'm like, look what they said about us. Isn't this so cool, babe? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, good job, because he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. It is. Sometimes I feel bad for Sean because he does a lot behind the scenes from like a manual labor perspective. And he doesn't get the
he always
relationships.
says, I am just the cheap labor. And I'm like, this is accurate, but you're also here for moral support when I'm having like a mental breakdown about something too. So I really appreciate that.
But I feel like we get so much of the communication with the guests, which can sometimes be hard, but also can be very rewarding. We get to see the reviews. We get to build the community with other hosts on like Instagram or wherever. So I feel like I'm reaping a lot of the benefits that makes it really sustainable in the short term alongside whatever your long-term goals are. But I feel like he doesn't get that. So he's just ends up, and he always says, I've brought that up to him and he's always like, yeah, but I do it for you and it's making you happy. So that makes me happy. And that's all I need. But I do feel like you have to have that. I guess if you're in it for hospitality, and this is where your why could be different. But if your why has something to do with hospitality, that's where those things become really rewarding.
Absolutely. No, and I'm with you. And it seems like we have a really good community in the Hocking Hills of people who are really supportive of each other. I go out to dinner or get drinks or coffee with a couple of different cabin owners nearly every month. And we just kind of share, all of the things. And it seems like this is the same scenario for all the husbands. They're like the ones who are remitting taxes.
Yes.
They're doing like the landscaping stuff. They're weeding. Yeah. Not that we don't do that too, but that's kind of their role in this business. Yeah. And unfortunately, communication wise, like it has to stay that way. Yeah.
So then these are all good things that I want people to be thinking about that are like unexpected rewards of cabins, but it also can be, and I've learned over 10 years, a little bit of a roller coaster. And there can be a year, like for us, that was 2021, where it was like insane and you couldn't possibly, like, you didn't have enough days for everyone that wanted to come. And right now it feels like we're definitely in kind of a lower part of the roller coaster. I'm hearing this from hosts nationwide. I have several properties. One of them is in a saturated market similar to Hocking Hills, and that one is struggling a lot more than the others. And I'm curious, like, how you all 4 years in have navigated kind of the ups and downs of the economy, of the short-term rental market, of saturation. What has your experience been like?
We are having the same experience as you. This is by and far the hardest year that we've had so far in 2025.
Yeah.
It looked like the first couple of months of 2025 that like it was going to we were going to be on par with the other years. But just in the past couple of months, we've really seen a downturn in like average daily rate. And also we've noticed people are booking super last minute, which I don't know if you guys are having that at all. And it's so hard to kind of predict. And it's stressful, to say the very least. This has been a hard year for us too. We also had a couple of like the winter was terrible here in Ohio this year. It hasn't been this bad in many years, not since we've been operating any of the cabins. And we had 2 total HVAC failures. And these cabins are pretty new, right? I mean, they weren't built more than 4 years ago. Right. We had 2 total failures just with how cold it got, along with just some issues that we could have never known about, really. And so financially, we're in a deficit right off the jump. Like we replaced 2 HVAC systems in January.
You had to fully replace them?
Fully replace. Yeah.
So within 4 years, there wasn't a warranty that covered them or anything?
No, there was only a year warranty. Well, there was a warranty on parts, but for the total HVAC, we had to buy like the new full unit for both. So that was really difficult. But these are like things that pop up, and you have to be ready. Like you have to have some money in the bank and be ready for this when these things come, because they do. And then we've just, there's just been other like little things that have popped up, but I feel like every week we like are having a little bit of a disaster. They're fixable. They're not like the HVAC, but like our septic backed up like twice in 3 weeks. And, and that's not typical. It's just people, flushing things that they're not supposed to, even though, we have signage that says not to. But these are all things that can happen. You don't get to decide when they do, and you have to be ready for them. And, it can feel like it's just like taking over your life when it's happening. It's a lot of sleepless nights when those types of things happen. But on top of that, we are seeing less nights booked and for a lower average daily rate, lots of last minute bookings. And our summer calendar is looking a little sketchy right now. Yeah. So we're just kind of like riding the ride and kind of like bracing for impact, because I don't know how long this is going to last. But there are a few things that we have done to try to help us, which is like add on these services that we're now adding to all of our cabins. So
through Airbnb's new launch, or separate from that? Okay.
Separate. We actually launched it before Airbnb announced that they were launching any of this. We've been offering for almost a year. We've been offering in-cabin spa services, shuttle service to and from like the wineries and the breweries in the area.
Oh, that's nice.
And also in-cabin chef services, or like they'll even meal prep for you before you come and just have like everything ready for you when you get there, which is really cool. And then as of yesterday, we just launched photography sessions now at our cabins too. So you can get like family photos or, couples photos at our smaller cabin. And we paired with a girl that we met through an elopement that we had at our cabins last fall. And her pictures were like the perfect moody, like just really our aesthetic. Yep. And I thought there has to be something more we can do with this.
Yeah.
So these are just all services that people can add on once they book. We basically send them the links to all of these different places. So we're not directly involved with it. They just go to their websites and book it. Yeah.
How do you, because with all that you have on your plate, I've wanted to do this, but it feels so overwhelming. I had one person ask me about a masseuse, and I just like went on to Yelp and tried to coordinate, find someone who was available, then sent it to him. Then he didn't get back to me. Then she was booked. And it was just like, whoa, how do people do this?
Well, and if people were coming to us to try to set up all of those things, it would be way too much for us as well. So what we did, we actually, the shuttle service, the winery and brewery, they came to us and said, hey, we're doing this for a couple of other cabin owners in the area who own like multiple cabins. This is a service we offer. Here's our website. Look at our reviews if you want to meet us. and we have background checks. We're happy to share those with you.
Yep.
Of course, same with, like the in-cabin massage and spa services. They're happy to provide us with like the background checks and everything. We got to know them prior to allowing them into our cabin. And the same with the personal chefs that we use. We actually have a service that has about 5 different chefs based on what type of food you want. You can pick the various chefs. So like if you want Mexican, there's a specific chef that kind of specializes in that. Or if you want, a steak dinner, there's, a guy, Russell, who loves to do that. So, and they gave us this gift card to use at home before we actually, had them to our cabin. So we were able to fully vet these people to make sure it was a fantastic, because it's an extension of us, right?
Right.
If it's not a great experience, that just reflects poorly on us, and we can't chance a bad review based on, these additional services that we're bringing into the cabin. So yeah, essentially we have it in our listing that we offer these add-on services, and it's subject to their availability, of course. And add an additional cost so that nobody thinks that it's included in their stay. And then once they book, we just, through direct booking, we can just go ahead and send them like the links right then and there. And for Airbnb, we just say, if you're interested in any of these services, please reach out to us. And then I will just shoot them a text. I have just a note in my phone with the various links and whatnot.
And they book directly through the vendor then?
Yes, book directly through the vendor. And we've had people who have even reached out and they say, I really want to book this weekend with you, but we also really want massages while we're there. Is there any way you can give us, the booking link so that we can make sure that they're available, that weekend, which I've done. And I would say that's the one thing that has been a little bit difficult. Is there have been a couple of people who have reached out saying, we really want to do X, Y, or Z service, but then it won't be available the weekend they want to book. And they're like, oh shoot, well, we really wanted to do that. So maybe we'll find another time to come. And then you don't hear from them again. So that,
or they book another cabin and then book that through the link that you gave them, but they're somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's so tricky.
Yeah, but we have a specific booking link so that obviously like the in-cabin massage and everything, they know when it's coming from us because they're inputting our address and all those things. But we do get a kickback from some of them. So we're getting like small commissions for sending our guests to them. So it's like a nice little, it's enough for me and Tony and Rocco to go get dinner like once every few weeks. It's kind of just,
it's just a nice gesture,
added bonus. But you'd be surprised. Like I would say probably 80% of all the people that book with us ask about at least one service.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is higher than I thought. Okay.
It's a lot.
So then what is your thinking about the new Airbnb services, and have you looked into how that will play with what you're doing now? Because a lot of people are asking about this.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it. It seems like there's a lot of drama with the services right now. People are really divided on them.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I would say is I haven't looked super far into it just because the Hocking Hills is not a region that is one of the 240 cities that they are offering services in.
So it's not
you go to the services tab on Airbnb, I actually just did it again this morning just to make sure.
I didn't know it was only limited. This shows
there's no one. Yeah, there's just 0 search results. So it's not so much something that I feel like I have to worry about at this point. And I don't even want to say worry. I think that there's pros and cons to this. I do see in a lot of my little Facebook groups, people are kind of freaking out about the idea of these strangers coming into their homes that they haven't gotten to vet themselves. And I do understand that, because at the end of the day, like how far is Airbnb going to, vet these people? But I've also seen that you can opt out. Like you just reach out to customer service and you say there's check boxes and all of these things. So I don't want to say that I'm polarized one way or another with the Airbnb services. I do feel like they kind of copied off of us because we were already offering them, but it's a great idea. And I think that we all probably assumed that they would roll out something like this, just in them having the experiences category, that this was probably like the next step.
Yeah. But it does kind of take the value proposition that you were offering. If someone books with you, you have all these things for them, and now they can book anywhere and just book your Airbnb. Yeah,
absolutely. I guess I would say like the only pro that I could see is that if they, and I hate to say this, but if they have a bad experience, it's totally not on you. I mean, although it could still reflect in your review, they could say, we booked this cabin, we had this service, and the service was not good. And it
but wouldn't they review the service separately?
I would think so.
That might then force them to think differently about it.
True. I think like, I don't know though if you've had this where we just had a guest this past week and ended up on a really good note, but she had a really like she struggled with the ride in just because it's windy, which
Yeah.
we mentioned, of course,
Yep.
in our listing and all these
One of
things.
ours is like that.
And she was really upset about it. And
Yeah.
I kept thinking we're going to get a really bad review because
Yeah.
of this. So I want to say that people would review the service, but I think that the whole experience is what people sometimes review together, and you can't
Yeah.
necessarily take out these factors. Like that was the experience they had,
That's
and they
right.
correlate that to your cabin, right?
It's a really good point because our cabin in Boone has a very windy road, and in the winter, it's
Oh yeah,
and it's gravel, so
yeah,
it's impossible to clear it completely, and inevitably that makes its way into our reviews. Like
it
we had a great
does.
stay, but the road
It's
made
a
it really tricky
stressful
to get
ride
in.
in. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. We get that from time to time too. It honestly, it hasn't reflected in our reviews. We haven't gotten less than a 5-star because of that, but people have certainly mentioned it.
Yep.
And you want to be like, yeah, I mean, it's the area and we have it posted in
I
so
know.
many different
Yeah,
places, but
I know.
sometimes people they don't read, or I don't know if they just don't expect, that it's going to, be the way that it
That's
is.
right.
And, so
I
anyway.
think the people who write about it in the reviews didn't read the description, so they were surprised by it, and then they feel an obligation to let other
To
guests
tell
know so
other
that they
people.
don't get surprised.
I completely agree with you on that. It's not necessarily like they're not trying to bash you
That's right.
or detract from your cabin, but they are trying to let other people know because they had such an experience.
An experience,
Yeah.
yes, and it was probably stressful for them. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. One thing that I think that's interesting about your property is that you have one cabin that's for 2 people,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other 2, which we talked about, for 8 and for 9, which have very
Mm-hmm.
different layouts. I'm curious about your hosting experiences with large groups versus small groups, because I think a lot of people in the early stages, when they're thinking about buying a cabin, their first
Mm-hmm.
cabin, they might be asking themselves this question: do I start with one that I can host my family and friends, or do I start with a small one because it feels easier?
Right.
What would your advice be to someone who's grappling? Because you work directly with both of them.
Well, we've done both now. And I think that something can be said for, we did 2 big ones and we honestly said never again. We
Hmm.
said, we will stick to smaller cabins, couples cabins moving forward. And that's not the way that we feel, is not how everybody feels. We have had a lot of groups, larger groups, disrespect our largest cabin. And it's such a beautiful place and it kind of just makes you sad.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is something to be said for couples cabins. One of the reasons why we decided to do 2 large ones right off the jump was because of the nightly rate that we could get for the larger cabins. But now we're seeing a shift, because couples cabins are all the rage now. And you could rent our couples cabin for nearly the same amount as our A-frame on the weekend. So there is something to be said for these smaller square footages and these,
Mhm.
less occupancies, but getting a higher nightly rate if you're, offering something that maybe not everybody else is in this, in this luxury space. Um, but they're 2 totally different types of rental.
Right.
But I would say exponentially, we have more headaches at the larger cabins,
Yep.
and that's to be expected.
Yeah.
There's a lot more wear and tear. There's a lot more that can go wrong. We
Yep.
have the added amenity of the saunas at the big cabins. We don't have that at our couples cabin. We did believe we were going to add it at the couples cabin, but with seeing how many people struggle to use it at the larger
You're like,
cabins,
nope.
we've decided not to do that. So, different strokes for different folks. I think our lodge brings in by and far the highest nightly rate still. It does pay for itself, even when we do have the issues. But it's just a different type of rental. We hardly ever hear from our couples at our couples cabin. It kind of runs itself. So my recommendation to new and investors or new people to the Airbnb and short-term rental experience, if I could do things all over again, I think I would start with a couples and maybe work my way up. But I also would do so much research for the area on what the nightly rate is for couples or a 4-person cabin versus a 9, 10, 11, 12-person cabin, because you might find that they're very similar, which sounds crazy, but it is the way it is.
Well, and it depends on location too. Because like Cozy Rock, we get double the nightly rate of what we do from our cabin that sleeps 8 to 10.
Oh my
and Cozy Rock sleeps 2 to 4. Now, part of that is location and saturation of market. Boone is very saturated. Freeport is not as saturated.
That's true.
And another one, and these are all things that people should be thinking about. We market Cozy Rock. We do not market the one in Boone because there's so many tourists who are usually going there, right? So there's a lot of reasons. But with the smaller one, we were able to invest in higher furnishings, better art. I could hire an interior designer. With the larger one, we had so much furniture we had to buy. I'm not an interior designer, so I did it myself. And that shows and reflects in nightly rate, right? I think there's a lot to consider. I also think it's interesting. Just recently, I've started thinking about this. We hear from our guests at Cozy Rock who are mostly couples, but it's usually just like, we're here, it's beautiful. Like, we don't get a lot of complaints.
Right.
The larger one, for the most part, guests are easy. But I do think when you're booking for a couple, it's just you and your significant other usually, right? And so the only people that it affects if something goes wrong are the two of you. And so I think you can afford to be a little bit more laid back. If you are booking a trip for a bachelorette party or for a group of friends and you are the one responsible for it, I think you tend to escalate things faster and more aggressively because you are feeling the like responsibility of making your friends or family members' vacation good. And that was something I never thought about when I first started.
I certainly didn't think of that. We were nowhere near thinking about, what the communication factor was going to be. But you're right.
Human dynamics.
And now with Airbnb, and I think it's good that they've done this. Don't get me wrong, but I think with being able to add in, all of the people that are traveling with you too, and all of those people being able to reach out to you as well, we definitely feel that on our bigger cabins. And I also would say that sometimes, like a person who didn't book it will ask a question, which was already answered, earlier with the booking guest. But that's okay. I mean, those are few and far between, but I totally agree with you on that. Like, I just didn't even recognize, the dynamic of having exponentially more people versus a couple. And like when Tony and I travel, just us two, we are so laid back. But if we're with like his whole family and there's, like his grandpa still travels with us and he's like in his 90s, but we went to Italy together and we needed to like see how many steps there were going to be in order to get him into
all those questions.
All of these things, which like maybe I seem like I was like the high maintenance guest at that point because there were just some questions that we needed to know the answers to. Whereas if it were just us two, we would never need to know any of those things and it really wouldn't matter,
That's right. I used to be the one who, that's right. I used to be the one who booked all of our cabin trips for my friends. And I remember one in particular, it was a large group. There were maybe like 15 of us. And we went to this cabin, we were younger at this point. So we were all like really looking forward to it. This was like our big vacation. And we show up and I'd gotten everyone excited about it because I'm in charge of like recruiting everyone. So I was like, there's going to be a hot tub. There's going to be this. And then we show up and the hot tub is cold.
Oh, man.
So everyone is so disappointed. And I remember looking back now, I was so rude to the lady. Like probably not rude. Like I wasn't out
Yeah.
of line, but I was
But
like
you felt
upset.
like you were letting your friends down
Yeah.
because you were the one in charge of, and I make all of our travel itineraries too. So if anything
Right.
goes wrong, I like immediately snowball and have a meltdown about,
Yes.
what's not going right because I research like so much on the front end of a trip. Like
Yeah.
I love planning all aspects.
Me
So
too. But then you feel the
you
responsibility.
do. Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
And so I think about myself then and I'm like, oh, the poor property manager who had to deal with me.
Right.
They
She had
ended
to
up
deal with me.
right. But the
Yeah.
reason was if it had been just me and my boyfriend at the time, I would have been disappointed and I probably would have said something like, "Hey, it's not working," and expected like a small discount.
Right.
But with 15 people, they ended up giving us a free weekend in the off season, which
Oh
we
my gosh.
used,
Oh,
and it
that's
was
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
But it was because I was so adamant of like, I've let all these people down. I need to be able to
Right.
tell them something. And if you give us like $150 off divided by 15 people, like
Right.
that's not enough to make them feel like this is now okay. So I think
Absolutely.
about that moment, I guess is the moral of the story when I have guests who are upset at the larger cabin because I'm like, this isn't just about them. This is about the experience that they were trying to create for
Right.
their people.
Right. Absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. And I have certainly looked back to some of the communications I've had as a guest in the past. And I'm
Yeah.
always wondering, like, wow, I probably gave them they had like a stomach ulcer because of me,
I
even
know.
though I wasn't mean. I was just very straightforward.
Yeah.
And even sometimes someone who's straightforward is hard to handle as a guest.
Well,
For me,
especially as a
I get
woman.
my feelings hurt pretty easily, but I've grown a thicker skin, obviously, with hosting. But you just really feel bad if you've let somebody down, what their experience, what it was supposed to be versus what they're getting. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does, we do kind of have, like, I have that panic moment. Like I break out in hives on my chest if something isn't the way that it's supposed to be, or if they can't figure out how to work the sauna, because I understand what they're feeling in that moment. It's
Yeah.
not just me being embarrassed. It's wow, I know how they're feeling and they're really frazzled and
Yeah.
frustrated. So I really need to watch how I speak back to them. And that's where it circles back to I have to do these communications and
That's right.
not Tony, because he can't get into their brain and think about that.
That's right. This is the hardest to quantify part of the work, I think. When I'm doing cabin consultations or I'm just talking to friends about it, and either they're referring to it as passive income or they're recognizing this is hard work. Like, what do you find most hard? The
Mm-hmm.
piece you can talk about when the HVAC breaks. Here's what you then have to do and
Yeah.
how it interrupts your week.
Yeah.
Or here's what happens when a guest is frustrated and like the physical things you'd have to do. The one thing that I can't explain is that feeling when I've disappointed a guest. And the only people who feel this are folks like you and me
Or
who
other
like want
hosts.
to
Yeah.
create a really good experience, right? If you don't have that high bar, then you're not going to take it as personally. But if you do, that feeling of like, I've done something wrong, I've let them down, I somehow haven't lived up to this, and there's nothing I can do about it at this point,
Right.
or very little to like fix
Right.
it or make it better.
Yeah, there's just a lot of internal screaming going on when that
Mhm.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, gosh, like, and a lot of times we'll be like, the cleaners just left like 30 minutes ago. How on earth can this not be working now? And there's
I
a good
know.
chance that it was working when the cleaners were there and then
I
something
know.
happened. Who knows? These things happen to these properties. It seems like we always say our own home, none of this would happen in like 25 years at our own home, but it's going to happen without fail at one of the
Yeah.
cabins,
Yeah.
like from time to time. And we always joke that right after Tony leaves, like he's been doing landscaping or like fixing something completely unrelated to whatever else happens, that without fail, we will get a text or a call or a message that something else has happened. It's like this jinx we have that right after
Yeah.
he's been down there will be something else. And it's not usually anything big. It's just something like small, but they'll at least let us know. And we're just like, of course, because he
Small
was
things
just
I think are
there.
sometimes the most annoying. Like, we have a remote for our fan, and if the battery dies, it's not a normal battery, it's a watch battery, right? That's
Yes.
the most annoying because it's like, I feel your pain. You can't start the fan, but I can't drive 3 hours to give you a watch battery.
Right.
So I'm gonna have to like order one off Amazon, but it won't be there before the end of your
Until you
stay. So
leave. Right.
you don't get to use,
Exactly.
right?
We actually just had this happen where we had like the little chandeliers in all three of the bedrooms at the lodge. And we've had multiple issues where we've replaced them a couple of times, and they have the little remote that we double side tape like to the wall, and it have a little note that says like, do not take this off the wall. Just do what you need to do with it while it's, on the wall. And of course, everybody rips it off the wall.
Everyone who has a 3-year-old runs over and they grab the remote.
They grab it.
Okay,
yeah. It like gets dropped down the stairs, and then like the battery cover breaks off of it, and then it doesn't work anymore. So, I just said, I'm like, we can't keep doing this because this seems to be a pain point that should be easily remedied, right? Like, and we should just get a box fan in every room, which that's not the aesthetic solution. So we ended up switching out all the fandeliers to these just ceiling fans that have a single setting and a light on them. So you flip one switch, you get the single setting. And I know that some people like to sleep with different, levels of a fan, but there comes a point in time as a host where you have to say, I have to come up with the most foolproof, solution to this problem. And we're just going to do this. And, if we get complaints down the road that they couldn't turn the fan up or turn the fan down, we'll cross that path when we get there. But this way, there's no remote involved anymore. Just like little things like that. You have to do those for yourself so that you're not driving yourself nuts.
Right. And this is going back to large versus small. These are the things that I don't deal with as much at Cozy Rock. It's easy to like stock extra batteries and they don't disappear. It's easy to like it, kids aren't taking remotes off the walls and like leaving with them. I mean, not that I like hosting kids. That's just what happens. They like remotes. And I saw my own nephews love remotes. But it's just, there's so many people who aren't as invested with the couples. I feel like, and you've built a brand, people get invested in the brand, but it's usually the booker who's invested in it because they're the ones seeing all the stuff that you've created. Yeah. So when there's 8 people coming with the booker versus the significant other of the booker, it just changes their relationship with the brand and the cabin.
It really does. Yeah. And the majority of our stays are 2 nights because we're in a drivable market. So people aren't flying, to come stay in the Hocking Hills most of the time, although we have had some groups do that. And so we always say like, nobody loves a rental. Like that's kind of our line. Nobody loves a rental. It means just nobody's caring for the rental the way that they are their own home because they're only there for a couple of days, right? They kind of sometimes go crazy, it's like, I don't live here and I'm out of here in 2 days. Like I can be a little bit more, loose than I would be at home. And I don't necessarily think this is it's like a subconscious thing, right? It's like, I'm just here for the weekend. I'm here to have fun. I don't think there's a malicious intent with it.
Agreed.
It's just, they're not treating these homes the way that they would their own home.
That's right. But I do think I have found such a difference between Cozy Rock and my other cabins. One, I've created more of a brand around it and spend a lot of time marketing it. The other ones I haven't. And when people have that relationship leading up to the stay, whether they followed you on Instagram for a while or just the month after they book or whatever it might be, I do find that they treat it differently and with love and have a different relationship with it.
I completely agree. And I would say that our direct booking guests usually have found us from our social media. They treat our cabins far better than our Airbnb and Vrbo guests because they don't have that personal connection with us. They don't see the family photos that we're posting that says, we don't have a property management company. We're running this ourselves.
Yeah.
And they kind of feel a little bit more invested, like, wow, I need to take care of this place because these people clearly care about their place. And so should I. This isn't just a place I'm staying this weekend, This is like one of their homes and it should be treated as such.
Yeah. Maura, thank you so much for joining me. It was a treat to meet you in real life.
It's amazing. I literally just posted on my Instagram right before this. I'm like, I'm so excited to talk to Janice. I don't think she knows this or would consider herself famous, but I consider you to be like, you're like the gold standard when it comes to cabin owners. So I was so excited to come on here today. I love your and I'm going to call it this and don't be offended because I call your ramble sessions that you have on your stories. I'm like, I would love to just talk to my phone and have people listen along with me because I know that you get a lot of people interact with you and we're not quite there yet, but I can't wait for the day where I can start just having conversations on my stories and people are like, yes, this really resonates. I want to talk to this girl more.
Sean makes fun of me. He's like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, people. It might be nobody. I don't know. We're going to find out.
We never know, but I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Gold standard, I don't think so. I wish people could see how this is why I love this podcast. I am just stumbling along, figuring this out like everybody else. And that's where the beauty of even after 4 years, every time you stumble, you're figuring out something that you're going to do differently the next time.
Completely
and
agree.
that that is kind of what makes it addicting and fun. And I'm just grateful that there's a community around it now in a way that there wasn't when I first started.
Yeah, a really supportive one at that too. It's really
right.
cool. Well, I really appreciate it. And
It was great to meet you.
Maybe until next time.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.